Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about human rights and government policy. And welcome back, everyone. We're broadcasting tonight about the Canada election, and we are at Stephen Crozier's campaign headquarters in South Surrey, White Rock, and so we'll be keeping a track of what's going on, especially here in BC, because hey, that's where we are. But on the line with me right now, I have Paul Gilbert from the BC Disability Caucus, and of course, Paul always has lots to say about what's going on with policy and what people are really doing for as far as all of our rights are concerned. Go ahead, Paul.
Hi, Michael. Good to be here. Yes, I was reading over all sorts of material, trying to get myself sharpened up, and it's amazing how it's hard to get any friction from the things they say about the disabled in elections, because there's very little there.
Yeah, there's not a lot happening because the East Coast is just now closing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it must be.
So I know, of course, Quebec is always hopeful that their own party gets what they want, but Quebec is Quebec, and does that really have a lot of bearing on the whole nation?
No, the only thing I sort of always liked about Quebec is they tended to be a little bit more progressive than much of Canada, except when it comes to immigrants. They're a little bit more insular with people who are new coming into their province. Mm-hmm. Which is that's I imagine that's to be expected, considering they're trying to protect and advance Quebec culture.
Right.
So anything that varies from that is a little bit suspect.
Yeah. So, like you said, Quebec is, of course, Quebec. But as far as the rest of the nation is concerned, it looks like oh, that can't be right. I just Google searched some of the results, and it says that the Liberals so far have one seat. That can't possibly be right. So far, there's got to be more to it than that right now, right?
Yeah, well, this report that I'm seeing on TV is saying they have 120 seats, and Conservatives have 97, and the Bloc have 29. Mm-hmm. So it looks like a lot of people in Quebec voted Bloc.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's kind of expected for Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess because it's a little after 7 o'clock here, so I would imagine that what's the next line of off the East Coast? What's the next grouping of people to come on board as a count? So we'll have to see what happens with that.
Yes, definitely. I'm sort of hoping for what people have been saying might happen is a Liberal minority government dependent upon the NDP for support, because we've had some of the most progressive governments in Canada when that's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so, especially if the NDP is planning on what they want to do is review the Bill C-81, the Disability Act, and make sure that the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is properly implemented in Canada.
Right.
Which would be a move, what we really do desperately need. And we don't want to wait till 2040 until it's all done.
Well, Yeah, and by that time, how much of the document actually gets watered down, and
Yeah.
what actually in the end winds up getting put in place, So, because from my understanding, the UN resolution is a beautiful document, but it's going to get watered down, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
that's what really confused me with the whole consultation process. It was sort of held in secret almost, and involved a lot of charities.
Mm-hmm.
And all they were doing was implementing the convention, and they didn't really need to actually consult anybody to do that. They just needed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the disabled all over the world haven't been involved in the creation of the convention.
Right.
We just want our rights. All the convention gives us is the rights that everyone else has.
So, as far as that's concerned, I've been saying that of course we need if we're looking for real change, we're going to have to look for a different brand of government, one that isn't just so much one party, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to see some. If we want to see something progressive happen, we need to see a progressive idea like a coalition or a minority government come in place that would give more people more voice.
I agree. Minority governments are actually the best governments you can have usually.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did when they actually did the proportional representation vote in BC, they confused a lot of people with having a two vote process. You had to vote for yes or no on proportional representation, and then you had to choose which one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you look at how surveys and are created, and how you can get people to vote to be very conservative because they don't know what they're doing, that's one way to do it.
Well, yeah.
I personally think that the proportional representation vote was rigged so that people wouldn't go for it.
I wondered about that because of how confusing it was. That you had like several different websites coming up with explanations of what was happening, and nobody was actually clear.
Well, all you need to do to get people to be very cautious and conservative about what they vote for is confuse them, and that's what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it seemed like it was designed to do that. So thank you, Dave Eby, for doing that for us.
Mm-hmm. So of course, there outside of the first past the post, because Jagmeet Singh, he made a statement earlier about he wanted to make sure that first past the post system was set aside. I don't want to use the word eradicate, but he wants to put an end to it. So, how likely is that going to be if we wind up with just a liberal or a conservative government? We don't wind up with more of a coalition government. So,
oh no! If we don't, without a minority government, we're not going to see any real progress on many things.
Yeah.
They have to be dependent upon another party and hopefully a progressive party, because the Liberals and Conservatives have been in coalition during the Harper years.
Yeah.
They didn't talk about it much, but really that it was the Liberals keeping the Conservatives in power.
Okay. So, Naomi Patakakis just walked up, and I want her to say a few things, because Naomi has run for provincial office, and she is a strong proponent for rights for children with special needs and for teachers who are helping those same exact kids. Because you were once a special needs teacher, weren't you?
Correct.
Yeah. So, what do you think out of some of the issues they were seeing and everything?
I think for me, for the first time, we see several topics that are being becoming issues. And of course, the first being the climate change, the climate crisis, I should say. And the second being affordability in terms of homes not being affordable, rents not being affordable, medication for seniors, and education for youth. And this election has brought these issues to the forefront. So for me, whoever wins or whoever loses has to address them. And it's a good thing. A lot of people thought the election was people weren't being civil and people were lying and so on and subverting democracy. And even though those things have happened, the positive in this is that people have become, I feel, more engaged, especially young people. And I can see that in our riding here in White Rock, which is predominantly over 50 and seniors. We have had people from university, people from high school come in and help during the election. So there have been, in my view, a lot of positives. And I'm hoping that it will be a minority government because from what we have seen in BC with the BC NDP and the Greens, that has worked quite well.
I'm going to ask this question so both of you can hear it. Unfortunately, I just discovered a tech issue that I can't have you and Naomi hear each other at the same time. So I have to be a kind of a go-between on this one.
It's a shame. Okay. I'm wondering if, and Michael, if you could ask her why she thinks that it is that the fact that Canada spends less on social programs than most industrialized countries was never actually discussed during the election, because that's pretty stark.
I think that Jagmeet has really done a wonderful job in bringing that forward, and even before we started really getting into the election, a lot of people were borrowing from our platform. Mm-hmm. So Canada can certainly do a lot better. And I think people are just waking up to the fact that we're not doing as well as we could be.
Yes, people have been quite shocked when we bring that up on the BC Disability Caucus page. Yeah. That's the reality.
Yeah. Let's see if we can do this. Mm-hmm. Because I wonder if there's an underlying thing with the corporations that they want to keep some things set aside so that we only know part of what could be, because it would seem that Canada in itself, with all the technology developments and everything like that we could step away from a lot of especially like in industry. We could have a total green industry here in Canada, where we're producing all the things that we need with zero emissions and the medications to actually help a lot more people live better lives.
But Michael, the bottom line is that the rich have been running government. Whether government is liberal or conservative, the people in power are the people that have the money, and they're behind the corporations. And until we get a government that is in there for the people, I doubt that things will change very much. So that's why I'm hoping for a minority government, because we can push. Oh, I think we are going to head towards a minority, which would be wonderful, because that's going to open the door for change, in my view.
What do you think, Paul?
Well, I like the fact that there was some discussion in Canada on a wealth tax, because that desperately needs to happen. And the American presidential campaign has been, Bernie and Elizabeth Warren have been pushing that quite adamantly. We need to deal with the incredible wealth income and wealth inequity, and so that people actually can live their lives without being in desperate straits all the time.
Yeah. Well, Navy, what do you think of a wealth tax?
Oh, definitely. That was in the New Democrat platform.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure of the figures, but anything, I believe it was over 20 million, was definitely going to be taxed. And as well, the corporations, it used to be 18%, and then for years now it's been down to 15% corporate tax. And then we have all these people who put their money away in other countries where they can't, we can't follow how much is taken out of the country. Mm-hmm. So all these things need to be addressed.
Yeah. Okay, I definitely agree with that, and I think all three of us agree on the coalition government idea that's going to be best, so that regular people get more voice, right, and get more out of government. So
I'm excited. I'm excited to see what the NDP is going to do in the next 4 years, even though they might not have as many seats as we would like them to. I think we have finally someone that people like, and they don't just like it. I don't want to use the word adore, but that's what is in my mind, and that's Jagmeet. And for the first time, we have someone to represent Canada who, to me, is truly encompasses a huge part of what it means to be Canadian and come from a different cultural background. And that's the other positive thing that's happened in my mind, is that for the first time we have a leader who is not white and represents a minority. And people respect him and can see that he's passionate and he's intelligent. And I'm very happy with his performance, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he's going to be in Parliament.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, I was very pleased with the NDP's reaction to Bill C-81, especially with Cheryl Hardcastle. With the things Cheryl Hardcastle had to say when I spoke to her, that I think the NDP has lots of opportunity to advance disability rights in Canada during the next few years if they're in a position to influence the Liberal government.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely, and I like to see that actually happen. I'm trying to see if we can get some up to date poll results here. The reporting of the results seems to be kind of slow.
Well, they've announced on, I think it's CBC, that it looks like a minority Liberal. Do you want Stephen to come in?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit?
Yeah, that would be good. So Naomi's going to step off for a second, and she's going to send in Stephen Crozier, who is the candidate for South Surrey White Rock riding. I'm not exactly sure if he'll actually win the seat, but because it's a very tough conservative riding that we're in right now. But he definitely knows a lot about what's going on with issues and of course government. So, how are you, Steve?
Doing well,
Good to see
Michael.
you, man.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, how's everything going? You know, the with the nationwide one with the campaign. I mean, how many seats do you think NDP will actually pick up here?
I'm looking at it, and I think we're probably looking at somewhere between 30, maybe 35, something like that. It's really hard to tell. The results from Quebec were not a big surprise, I don't think, but with the Bloc Québécois taking a lot of the seats there, they really did us in, I think, in many ways. So. I think we'll do very well in BC. So,
yeah. Well, everybody seemed to think that this was the place to end their campaign.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
all the leaders were here yesterday, doing their last bit of campaigning and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And most everybody seemed to finish up here, with the exception of Justin Trudeau. He went to Victoria.
Yeah.
But then again, he's from. I think that's kind of where he's from anyway. So.
Kind of his home area in Western Canada at least. So yeah. Well, I think that this shows that it's an important area right now. BC is not always a place where elections are decided, and so far they're saying that it's probably going to be a liberal government. Whoops, just a second here, and
I'll. Hang on there.
Okay, I'm gonna. Can I get back to you?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry, Michael.
Yeah. Steven's busy, so hey, this is his campaign, so he's got to take that call, right?
Yes. He can't be unavailable.
No. We'll get back and forth with him for a little bit here.
Well, this is good.
If they pick up 30 seats, like you said, well, what do you think will happen there? As far as a coalition sort of thing, it's looking pretty right now.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead, that's fine.
Yeah.
Hey, you're running a campaign, right?
I know it's hard to keep up with everything.
Yeah.
So where were we then? Just about BC being pretty important because I think this is where the NDP are going to come on pretty strong, and we'll end up having the balance in power. So and that's important because it means that we can have a very strong influence on the government of Canada, and it's always been a positive thing for Canadians whenever we are in that position.
Yeah. Good.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And in the riding here so far, we've only had one poll reporting. But if I can keep up the, I'm hoping to at least double the votes here and make people realize that the NDP are a viable party in South Surrey White Rock. So.
Yeah. I was discussing how this particular riding has always been traditionally very conservative.
Yeah.
And because 4 years ago, it was actually a conservative, the original one, and then the Liberal Party got in on a by-election.
Right.
And we'll see what happens with all that. So. Yeah.
Well, Gordie Hogue is a very popular, pretty well politician here in the area as mayor, and then he was a Liberal MLA, and so his popularity is really interesting. Pardon? We're okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sorry. Interesting being in a mall.
yeah.
It's been great for us to be here though, because it's lots of traffic and people coming by, and pretty high profile. So that's been really positive. So
people are pretty warming up to the idea that there is another party in the area.
And the demographics are changing. People are moving out from the city, young families, because they can't afford to live in Vancouver. So things are really changing quite a bit here. So that's a positive thing. So
yeah. So, one of the things that we were discussing between Paul Gilbert, who's with the BC Disability Caucus, we were talking about how things will change after this election for people with disabilities, and especially if the NDP or the Greens actually have more of an influence in Parliament. So what do you think?
Well, a couple of things that I think will be very helpful, and one is the idea of pharmacare that's going to make things more affordable, and also housing. Housing is a big issue for everyone. So the NDP, the plan is to be investing in co-op housing. This is something that the Liberals backed away from in the mid-90s, actually investing in housing, and it's been one of the contributing factors to the unaffordability of a place, especially like the Lower Mainland. So this should be very helpful for all people, including people with disabilities. So part of this too has to do with when it comes to pharmacare, we're talking about head-to-toe health care, and this means that home care and support. Sorry, we've got a bit of a crowd here. So, but
crowd is good.
Yeah, crowd is good. Yeah, it would be really bad if it was that quiet. So, but anyway, so so it has to do with a lot of other supports as well in healthcare, which it just makes sense to provide these things, not just for the quality of life that people will be living, but even economically. It just makes more sense to provide the health care and the support that people need. So
good.
One of the things that Jagmeet Singh mentioned.
We can talk again later on, then, if you want.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. You were saying, Paul, about Jagmeet Singh.
Oh. One of the things that Jagmeet Singh mentioned in his disability statement is a review on disability payments, and well, I just created a video that yesterday that has the UN Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities talking about one of the first things that needs to be done is Article 28 of the Convention needs to be implemented. We need to give people with disabilities an adequate income so that they can live their lives without always being behind. So that would be an adequate income that would cover housing, clothing, food, and as far as the Indigenous disabled are concerned, it also covers the right to clean water. So those sorts of things that she's talking about. I'm hoping that Jagmeet Singh and the NDP are on board with seeing adequate income rather than basic income be the focus.
Yeah, I remember that being one of the things that it was one of the questions that you were asked at one of the all candidates, either between Surrey Central and of course the one over here at Semiamo House, about adequate income,
right,
and also Indigenous rights to adequate income and clean water.
Yeah,
and I remember.
Yeah,
go ahead with that.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean we do want to have a living wage, and this is something that we have to. Right now, we have a kind of sort of like our approach to healthcare. It's really a kind of patchwork. It's the same thing with income, so I think we really do have to work towards a living wage for everyone. I think probably many of your listeners realize or remember that there was a kind of a pilot project in Dauphin, Manitoba, way back in the 70s under an NDP government, and it was going quite well. This was with a living wage, and it got cancelled as soon as the Conservatives came into power. So it's certainly something that we want to work towards. In terms of housing itself, of course, it's been a right. with the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which happened in 1948, and Canada signed on to this, and yet we're not providing our people with adequate housing. And for Indigenous rights, of course, Jagmeet Singh visited Grassy Narrows and has pledged to ensure that Indigenous people do have clean water, and we've also pledged to put into practice the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, as well as the 94 recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation committee, but sorry, right now the word escapes me. I'm listening to the cheering in the background,
right?
and it's just sorry, but a commission. So,
the commission,
yes.
yeah. So, well, and that's important stuff. That we make sure that the Indigenous people and right now the people with disabilities, we're saying that they're our most vulnerable, but is there a way to change it so that people with disabilities are on equal ground with everybody else?
That's the goal.
There certainly is. I mean, interesting we're speaking about this, because when I got my first degree, my undergraduate, I was doing a lot of, for 2 summers, my work was to do research into the accessibility within Toronto for people with disabilities, and we've come a long way since then. We were working together with people with disabilities and doing the research, and with buildings and so many things that were just totally inaccessible. It was hard for a person with disabilities to actually get a job and be able to get there. So there are improvements, but like so many things when it comes to equality and equal access, we've got a long ways to go. So certainly we should be working towards that. Yeah.
So Paul said that's the goal on his end.
Okay.
So the BC Disability Caucus, they do a lot to raise awareness for people with disabilities, not only here in British Columbia, but you guys also try to do work nationwide, also, don't you?
Oh yes, we're routinely. We were just interviewed by somebody in Saskatchewan for a couple of interviews yesterday. Yeah. So we're branching out across the country quite a bit, because the issues are the same for all of us.
Sure. Yeah.
We need people with disabilities to be able to participate on an equal basis with others in all areas of life, and that's a huge challenge for everybody.
Yeah. It is a huge challenge for people with disabilities, and there's also challenges for everyone who is any type of a minority. So,
well, I think, indigenous disabled people are 35% of their population, and they're virtually invisible. They have no representative organizations. So yes, they're one very marginalized segment of our population that needs much more support than they're getting.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you've hit on something there, Paul, and that is that a lot of the barriers that various sectors of our community face have to do with a kind of ignorance, and whenever people, as more and more people with disabilities and Indigenous people are become more visible, and there are recognitions of the abilities that people have, the more those that ignorance is overcome, and people are looked upon in a much more positive and and realistic way. So I think that's the more people get out into the workforce, out into the community, the more those accessibility issues are overcome, the sooner those attitudes will also change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what the UN Rapporteur on disability just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but it's implementation and getting people to actually be on board with all the policies and everything.
Oh yeah.
I think that's more the problem, isn't it?
Well, it's it's definitely part of the solution is to work through different policies and yeah.
So, it looks like at this time the Liberals have if I'm reading this correctly, 146 seats.
119 for Conservatives.
The NDP is at 23.
Yeah.
We're getting close to the 30 you were talking about.
We're getting there.
We haven't even opened BC yet.
Yeah. So I'd like to see, as I said, that up around 35. I'd like to see the NDP with more seats than the Bloc Québécois, and that I think that would give us a good government. So better than we had anyway. Yeah. So. Okay, Gwynnie. Okay, take care. Thank you so much.
Sit on my couch and refresh every 10 seconds.
I know. Okay.
We are broadcasting from the Surrey South White Rock NDP candidate's office for Stephen Crozier, who we just heard from.
I just refreshed before I came up here. It's what?
So Paul, what are you thinking so far?
Well, I'm relieved that it looks like it's a Liberal minority government, as long as they partner with the NDP rather than the Conservatives.
Yeah. Well, some of the things there are. Some environmental issues, and of course when environmental issues come into play, it also strongly affects again back to the people with disabilities, that the Conservatives are totally willing to ignore all of the environmental issues. At least the Liberals are willing to recognize that they could exist.
Well, I think that what I would say is that the Conservatives' approach to environmental issues is pretty typical of them. What they want to do, from my perspective, both the Liberals and the Conservatives are corporate parties. They've allowed corporations to dominate our politics and our our economy, and so typical of the Conservatives. Their idea is to incentivize, give incentives to corporations to develop technology, and it's just not going to work. It's way too slow. Even if it were going to work to begin with, you have to understand that corporations are there to make a profit, and whenever you're developing new technology, unless you're giving them all of the funding that is necessary to develop that plus a profit, they're not even going to start. So it's a ridiculous concept. I'll give you another, something else that the Scheer government or the Scheer party wants to bring back, the Scheer Conservatives from the Harper days, and that is, if a family spends money on some sports or arts activity, then they get taxes back. Well, that's fine. But what they seem to ignore is the fact that so many families can't afford that expenditure to begin with. So they're creating this unfair imbalance, situation where they're totally ignoring a major sector of the population. Do they not know the statistics that 50% of Canadians are some $200 away from not being able to pay their bills? let's not
Well-
ignore that and give out these incentives. So this is in the economy. That's the way it works. They're doing the same thing with the environment. The Liberals aren't much better. I mean, if you take a look at where the Liberals would end us up, where I've often said that the Trudeau Liberals have had this slogan of "Choose Forward," and I've often said that that's the same choice as the captain of the Titanic. And look what happened there. And I think it's the same kind of arrogance that they don't realize that we can't choose forward, that they are not doing a good enough job. And this is something that the NDP have to make sure that they do. Hold them to the responsibilities that they should be fulfilling for the Canadian people when it comes to the environment, when it comes to the economy, and when it comes to social justice issues and economic justice.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, yeah, it's quite true. One of the things that strikes me in BC and nationally is that a lot of these things that we need desperately to spend money on are actually economic engines. I mean, recreation, cultural, and sport, rather than giving people a tax break for spending money, there should be investment in those areas. If many venues and many arts, culture, and sports activities are inaccessible to the disabled, and if we want more tourism and we want more involvement in the community, that those things need to change.
Yeah.
But also, it'll make a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, this is it. I mean, don't give tax breaks. Develop programs, and this is really important for all of us. I mean, back in the 70s, it's kind of interesting because back in the 70s, we were talking about the idea of how wondering how are people going to spend all their leisure time, because technology was coming on, so we knew that there would be less need in a certain way for work, and yet the wealth was going to be the same. So we were talking about shorter work weeks, and there were actually programs called leisure studies developed in universities, because these were meant to provide an understanding of what meaningful leisure was. And it's really interesting to think that was the case then. Now you have people working 2 or 3 jobs, just trying to keep a roof over their head, and as you're saying, Paul, many parts of the society are of the population are really being excluded, and we can't have that. We have to recognize that our country is for everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of everyone, we have some young people. Nate over there. Nate? Let's get Nate to say a few words about why he helped out with helping out with our community in the political way here. Go ahead, Nate.
Hi, how's it going? So what's the question?
So, tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to volunteer to help out a political campaign.
Okay, so I guess my background, I'm a graduate student at UBC. I study kind of neuroscience, but kind of from a computational standpoint. I sort of started getting into leftist politics from like watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts on the internet. And then our NDP provincial government was like pretty good so far, so I kind of felt compelled to kind of get involved in the process and volunteer a bit. Yeah.
So, is there anything that you like to, particular things you'd like to see change in our community, or issues that are dear to your heart?
I guess, I mean, the big motivator for a lot of young people is climate change, so that's definitely been an influence in like what got me kind of politically conscious, in the sense that like there's this problem that's definitely approaching, and then kind of seeing the discontinuity between like the magnitude of the problem and the lack of response from the government, and understanding sort of why that became important to me. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So you joined in with Stephen, and what's the experience been like?
Yeah, so I've mostly been doing canvassing with him, so going door to door, knocking on doors, and trying to, I guess, mostly, get people, because it's kind of like a marketing thing, right? Like you're trying to give them an impression of the candidate,
Right.
and so then they have some kind of personal connection to him, right? And then hopefully they get, are encouraged that way to engage with the platform and then maybe vote for us at the end of that, right? So that's been interesting, like seeing, how different Canadians, think about politics, because there's it's kind of a wide range of opinions when you see there. Like sometimes, some people are very shy and they won't tell you. They'll just politely say they're still making their mind up, right? But then some people also are very, very passionate about what they believe in, even if it doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Well, but that is one of the really cool things about living in Canada is that even if your opinion doesn't always make sense to everybody else, you're allowed to have it, right?
Yeah, well, I think,
So,
in terms of... Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so obviously everyone can have their own opinion, but in terms of, having an opinion that's based on, a real understanding of the world, right, that's something that I think is lacking.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess, people kind of say, we're in, a post-truth world now where everyone's kind of siloed off into their own, political culture based on whatever their, identity or affiliation is, right? And then they only consume media that kind of reinforces that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, cool. So do you get most of your information from podcasts, online, or mass media?
Yeah, definitely. Like YouTube. There's a lot of leftist YouTube creators. Kind of BreadTube, you might call them. And yeah, so that's kind of what I kind of accidentally started discovering that, and then it kind of started pulling me in that direction. And I've also started reading theory. There's a guy named Richard Wolff who's an economist, a leftist economist, and so he's written some books about. I guess the one I'm on now is comparing the different kind of economic philosophies, like neoclassical, Keynesian, and Marxist economics. Right. Yeah. So it's been interesting that way, kind of seeing what the actual thinking is behind everything. Yeah.
So, okay.
Cool.
So thanks for joining us.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Take care.
Okay. So we're hearing from some of these younger people that actually decided to help out with the campaign, and hey, some interesting opinions that he's run into. So with that, it looks like the Liberals are up to 153 seats. Conservatives 118, and NDP 24. The Quebec Party, of course, is still stuck at 35, and Greens are they've gained 3 seats, according to what I'm looking at on the nationalpost.com. Okay, so Paul. So
yeah, it looks like. I'm sort of hopeful, but it's all down to the wire all the time. But yeah, if the Liberals are working with the NDP, we'll probably end up with pharmacare. We'll probably end up with better pensions for seniors, because that was supposed to be reviewed right after the Liberals came to power, but they never actually fixed the problem affecting the disabled and homemakers.
I'll probably do the song.
okay, all right.
So are you going to pick it up again at some point, or how's it? Or did you want to? Or was that good?
Good. That's good. It's good. All right. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Michael,
Really
thanks
cool.
for coming down.
Yeah.
It was great.
All right.
It was great.
Okay. So, sorry, Paul.
Sorry.
There's a lot happening around here because we are in a campaign headquarters, right?
Yes, I've seen them active and I've seen them quiet.
They're actually pretty active because, truth be told, Stephen isn't really hopeful that he will win, but he is hopeful that he's going to tear a bunch of votes away from the Conservatives.
I hope so.
And which would put the liberal part guy back into play, but I guess that's not. It's not as bad as it sounds. It's like we're kind of playing what's bad to what's worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
because like I said, this is a very conservative area. Some of the things that as living here that I hear people say, my neighbors say, and everything about different issues around indigenous rights. Well, they take the conservative view of, hey, we had to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps in this country that we built. But
yes, a privileged American dream position.
Right, exactly. And on the, I get criticized on a regular basis because I'm anti-oil, so they're like, how do you expect us to run an economy without Alberta having the oil sands and without having a pipeline? So there we have it on that one. So this is kind of the environment that exists in South Surrey White Rock. So yeah.
Yes, I know it's scary. My one of my brothers and his wife and family have been living in White Rock for quite some time, but I don't think they'll be able to sway the vote all by themselves.
No, it's a definite uphill battle. So another friend who actually was running in the Green Party in the same exact area that she's very passionate about Indigenous rights. She's passionate about rights to equal pay and making sure that people with disabilities have access so that they can actually get the jobs and everything. I know a lot of people that have a disability, and they don't want to be seen as having a disability. They want to be seen as they're able to do a job.
Well, yes, certainly. The one of the big prejudices out there is that the disabled are just unable. Mm-hmm. That's the perception that the general population has of us, that we just can't do things. Mm-hmm. And when you get hired in someplace, typically what happens is you get less pay than is normal there, and you have a position that you're overqualified for, and you have virtually no opportunity to move up.
Right.
That's the typical situation with people with disabilities in the workforce, and of course many of us aren't in the workforce as well, mm-hmm. because we can't get. It takes us 100 applications to get an interview, and that's not a good thing.
Well, yeah, the normal statistics are you put out 100 resumes to get 10. Was it? I think it's 10 interviews to get one job, right?
Yeah.
If you're labeled with a disability, and I'm going to stick with that idea of being labeled with, because in so many cases, I've known people who were labeled with a disability that mentally they were way more able to do the job than the person who actually was sitting there doing it.
Oh yes, truly. I know a number of disabled professionals. Well, I'm the vice president of the BC and the Canadian Association of Professionals with Disabilities. So I'm familiar with a lot of professionals who are overqualified for what they do. Mm-hmm. And certainly it's more typical for the disabled to have more qualifications than the people they work with than less.
Well, yeah. I've known a lot of people also that I'm going to say this as an entrepreneur because it's scary enough being an entrepreneur to begin with. It's enjoyable, but it's also scary because if you don't make the sale that particular day, you may not eat later on that week.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a person who's labeled with a disability and you're collecting an income from that your disability check, what you have is an extra scare that if you make money, that the government claws it back away from you.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes, they should actually be eliminating all the clawbacks.
yeah,
It's especially since when you consider what the poverty line is, they're not the amount of people with disabilities receive is way below the poverty line.
right.
It's they're getting half of minimum wage.
Yeah. So my friends who have a disability and they're operating a business, the fear is, do I keep going with the business because they're going to claw every penny back? And what if something backslides?
Mm-hmm.
And then they can't get back on disability because they had operated this business. So now, now you're looking at a homeless situation.
Yeah.
And
Well, also, working costs money. I mean, you have to go to work. You usually often have to end up spending money on food while you're there. Mm-hmm. You have to be dressed for work. It's expensive, and if you have a disability, there may be accommodations you need to use to get things done, and accommodations employers don't like providing them.
No.
So most employers don't provide accommodations.
No.
Despite the fact that it's illegal.
Right.
But it's expensive to work, and it's expensive to have a disability. So we really do need a decent employment plan for the disabled, and what they've done with the Employment Equity Act since the mid '80s hasn't done it. I mean, if you look at the stats for the Canadian Human Rights Commission report from 2 years ago, did a 20-year review, and basically the disabled haven't been helped by employment equity at all.
Yeah.
It was something like 3% is the level of disabled participation
Mm-hmm.
in federally regulated employers, and it's not improving.
No, it's not improving.
Oh, you got a singer.
Yeah, Steven's actually singing his campaign song.
Ah.
So, we'll have to post the lyrics for that probably tomorrow sometime. So, but
Yeah, sorry to be so serious.
no. It's good that we're being serious about this because these are a real serious issue with it, and it looks like the Liberals right now are at 159 seats. So,
Oh, we don't want them to get too many.
no, we don't want them to get too many. We want them to have just enough. So,
Yes, we want them dependent upon the NDP.
that's right. So, because
They have to have 170 seats to have a majority.
yeah, and it looks like they're 9 seats away from that right now. It just jumped up by 2 seats. So, and that's according to, of course, the National Post right now. So, yeah. So
Yeah, we really don't
keep-
want them to win.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that for I guess we'll be able to broadcast for about another maybe 30 minutes or so. So we'll keep an eye on that for that time, and we'll see what happens in the morning, right?
Yes. Are polls coming in BC yet? I think the polls closed an hour ago now.
That's what I'm looking to see. We're scrolling through here. Let's see if we got anything. It's allowing me to scroll through here, so I'm trying to see if we. Okay, well, maybe we might have something. It looks like we do have some results coming in from British Columbia this time, yeah. So yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what Sven Robinson is like when he's back in government.
Yeah.
Sven Robinson was a real firebrand when he was in government before.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see how this actually works out. Because, like you said, we don't want the Liberals to get too many seats, but it doesn't. At this time, it doesn't look like the Conservatives are close to 170 at all. They're only at 119, so they would need 51 more seats to take the majority,
which is a relief.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is a relief. Yes.
We definitely don't want Donald Trump north.
No. So, I think there's...
Janet could not stay in town.
Oops.
With
Sorry,
Ken's baby
I've got to turn that off.
The house.
Mm-hmm.
It had become her Pandora's box.
Every once in a while, when I'm cruising on the internet, my audiobook starts up.
Ah.
Yeah, I don't know why that happens. Codes conflicting.
Yes, that must be exactly what it. Okay.
Yeah, they have I have a screen that's trying to load that'll tell me who's winning more in seats in BC, but it doesn't want to load.
No, and that's I was trying to get it to go to a specific province, but it doesn't really want to do that for me. It's either nationwide or I can select a couple of favored ridings out of this, which. Okay.
It's interesting. So the Conservatives won most of the ridings in Alberta, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I find that absolutely amazing. Oh, and Prince George Caribou went Conservative, of course. I used to live there.
Yeah.
They had a real love affair with the Conservative Party and the Social Credit Party up there.
Yeah. Oh, it looks like Jody Wilson-Raybould is having a bit of a fight on her hands. She has so far as the poll has come in that for Vancouver Granville. That she is running third with 519.
Oh no!
And the Conservative is at 575.
That's a shame.
Yeah, she's falling behind. That is a shame. I've said this several times. That is one politician that actually did exactly what she said she would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to have seen her win, but
it looks like she's got a serious struggle there. But in comparison to the other NDP or the Green Party. She actually has them pretty well beat. So
Yeah.
but it doesn't look like we'll have to see what happens. But at this time, it doesn't look very very good for Jody Wilson-Raybould at this time as an independent candidate in that riding. So
It's a shame.
yeah.
Yeah, really not a lot of results in from BC yet.
No, not a lot.
But I'm not surprised that that the Caribou went Conservatives and the Prince George Peace River went Conservative.
Mm-hmm.
They usually do.
We'll give a quick check for the riding we're sitting in. Oh, yikes. Okay, well, it looks like as we were saying about the Conservative for South Surrey or White Rock, the Conservative is in the lead. Carrie Lynn Finlay is actually in the lead with 3,000 and 2,300 going so far to the Liberal candidate, Jody Hogue. So yeah, Stevens got 723 so far. So, and our other friend Beverly Hobby, she is at 411. One thing I am going to say this: some of the other extreme right groups so far haven't seen any seats at all, which says something for us as a country that these extremist groups aren't seeing the votes.
No, thank goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. I can never remember his name. The guy that was in the debate that was a fascist.
Yes.
Yeah, People's Party.
People's Party. That's exactly who we're talking about. And so far, nationwide, they haven't seen any seats. So.
Yeah, that's a relief.
Yeah.
There's been a rise of fascism in many countries across the world, and hopefully we don't see that ever here.
Yeah. So, of course, back to our nationwide results. Liberals at 157. It actually has fluctuated back. We were as high as 161. It's kind of interesting seeing the fluctuations with these things.
Mm-hmm.
How they fluctuate back and forth. So.
Yeah. Yeah, tight races.
Yeah.
I like tight races.
Yes, tight races are actually very, very good. So it looks like more or less the Conservatives and the Liberals are running about 34% of the popular vote right now.
So who is the new Green candidate?
In this area?
Well, they have three now. I imagine it's Elizabeth May, the other guy from Up Island, and who knows?
Well, I know the last federal Beverly Pixie Hobby, the last time that she actually ran in the federal election, she ran as NDP, and this time she's running as Green. So, she's a environmental rights lawyer. And very very knowledgeable about what's going on with our environment and how our environment will affect our rights and how our rights are being served up. As a lawyer, so yeah. So very interesting person. But in this riding, she is definitely dead fourth. So unless something really dramatic changes, it looks like the Conservative is actually going to take the seat. So for this area. So yeah, well, we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah. Tomorrow we'll actually have a final result.
Yeah, but right now it doesn't look like. It looks like percentage of the as far as percentage of the popular vote is concerned, the Liberals and the Conservatives are dead even. So there's not a lot of difference between the two that way. So
no, their policies are pretty much similar, especially their military policies.
Yeah. So
it's a shame. The Liberals used to stand for peacekeeping, and they've shifted way away from that now.
Do you think a lot of that has to do with the mindset of Justin Trudeau, or just the mindset of the party itself?
I suspect a lot of it comes down to Justin Trudeau wanting to get along with the U.S. Because I don't see him necessarily as a militarist to the core, but the U.S. certainly is militarist. And getting along with them, I mean, all they had to do was ask, and we had a huge explosion in our military budget.
Well, yeah.
And we're involved in but the Canadian press doesn't report a lot on it. So the fact that we were helping in the Syrian war efforts by the Americans and the Israelis, it never got discussed, except that we were building things over there that could be used to attack Syria. But our media is very poor on actually following through and giving you back details.
Well, yeah. There's a whole lot of misreporting that happens, and stories tend to get ripped apart and put back together, and so they tell a different story. So yeah. So anyway, we're gonna let this go for the night, and we'll see what happens in the morning. BC polls are starting to come in, and we'll see how it actually plays out for the rest of the country. But right now, it looks like a pretty dead heat between the Conservatives and the Liberals. As far as the popular vote is concerned, number of seats are reflecting a little bit differently. But these things tend to want to even out, though, you know. So we'll see how it all plays out throughout the night, and I've been getting a lot of my information, just so everybody listening knows, from the National Post website. They actually have a chart up there with a map and everything, so you can kind of see what's going on. So I invite everybody, please do keep an eye on it, as we will be, and we will see who actually wins it in the morning. All right. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Thank you.
And I want to thank some of our sponsors. I want to thank Stephen for allowing us to come into his party here in South Surrey, White Rock. And I also want to thank Kinetics Media for helping sponsor this whole thing, broadcast tonight, with Fractal Marketing. Go to Kinetics digital.ca for more information on Fractal Marketing if your company needs marketing strategy and can't quite afford the CMO. Okay. Thanks, Paul. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.